If someone had told me a year ago that my marriage would start falling apart because of one sentence at a Sunday dinner, I would have laughed. Not because my marriage was perfect. God, no. But I really thought Emma and I were solid. We had been married for 11 years. That is long enough to know exactly how your spouse likes their coffee, which relatives to avoid at weddings, and what tone of voice means, "I'm fine," when they are absolutely not fine, and might mentally be setting your car on fire. I'm Will, 39, engineer, professional overthinker, and owner of a 1968 Ford Mustang Fastback that I restored with my own hands. That car was not just a car. It was the result of years of work, weekends in the garage, scraped knuckles, late-night YouTube tutorials, and enough curse words to summon a small demon. I bought it before I married Emma. It was mine before the house, before the shared bank accounts, before the matching towels she insisted were adult. Emma used to love that car. At least she loved taking pictures next to it when we were dating. She loved telling people, "My boyfriend rebuilt this himself," like I had personally engineered a rocket instead of mostly bleeding on rusty bolts while muttering threats at a carburetor. Then we got married, life got busier, and the Mustang became that thing in the garage. Not Will's car, not his passion, not his project, just that thing. Still, I never complained. Marriage teaches you to pick your battles. You learn that some hills are not worth dying on. That was basically my role in Emma's family too. Peacekeeper, problem solver, wallet with legs. Emma came from one of those families that used the word family the way some people use duct tape. It was supposed to fix everything, hold everything together, and cover up whatever mess nobody wanted to deal with properly. Her parents, Richard and Susan, were nice people on the surface. Richard had the calm voice of a man who had spent 30 years avoiding direct conflict by hiding behind newspapers and lawn care. Susan was warm, cheerful, and had the dangerous ability to make emotional manipulation sound like a casserole recipe. Then there was Tyler, Emma's younger brother, 29 years old, though emotionally he hovered somewhere between 17 and a raccoon that had found a credit card. Tyler was the family emergency that kept respawning. If life was a video game, Tyler was that annoying side quest you accidentally accepted in the tutorial and somehow still couldn't finish 11 years later. He had been in trouble as long as I had known him. Parking tickets, credit card debt, a failed streetwear brand that consisted of 12 hoodies in his apartment, and a logo that looked suspiciously like Nike had been drawn by a tired ferret. A crypto phase, a sports betting phase, a "my friend has a startup" phase, a "technically it's not gambling if you understand statistics" phase, which was impressive because Tyler did not understand statistics, money, or consequences. Every time, the same ritual happened. Tyler messed up. Tyler panicked. Susan cried. Richard stared into the distance like a Vietnam documentary narrator. Emma always ran to save him. At first, I helped. Of course I did. When you marry someone, you want to be good to their family. You want to show up. You want to be the kind of husband who says, "Don't worry, we'll figure it out." Even when "we" means you, and "figure it out" means your savings account is about to get mugged in broad daylight. The first time Tyler needed help, it was $3,000. He said he had fallen behind on rent because his hours got cut. I believed him. Emma cried a little. Susan cried a lot. Richard said Tyler was going through a rough patch, which was apparently family code for, "Please open your wallet and don't ask too many questions." So I helped. Tyler promised to pay me back in 2 months. That was 9 years ago. I am still waiting. Maybe the money is walking back slowly. Maybe it got lost. Maybe it joined a monastery. Then came $5,000 for a business opportunity. Then $2,000 for car repairs. Then another $4 because he had miscalculated some bills, which is a very elegant way to say, I spent money I did not have on things I did not need. Eventually, I told Emma I was done. No more loans, no more emergency rescues. Emma was not happy, but she agreed. Or at least she made the noise people make when they want you to think they agree so the argument can end. Fine, she said. And when a wife says fine, every married man knows that word does not mean fine. It means, this issue has been placed in storage and will be brought back later with interest. For a while, things were quiet. Tyler still made questionable choices, but they were smaller disasters, the kind you could ignore if you squinted. Then one Sunday, Emma told me her parents wanted everyone over for dinner. Just a family dinner, she said. That should have been my first warning. In my experience, when someone says, just a family dinner, it is never just a family dinner. It is either a surprise announcement, a group intervention, or a financial ambush with mashed potatoes. I asked, any special reason? Emma was folding laundry on the bed. She did not look at me. No, Mom just wants to see everyone. Now, Emma had many talents. She was organized, smart, loyal to a fault, and could detect a dirty coffee mug from 3 rooms away. But she was a terrible liar. Not dramatic terrible, not soap opera terrible, more like a child standing next to a broken lamp saying, "The wind did it," while holding a baseball bat. I watched her fold the same shirt 3 times. Is Tyler going to be there? I asked. She paused for half a second. There it was. The half-second pause. The emotional loading screen. Yes, she said. Why? No reason. Will. What? Don't start. I laughed. I asked one question. And I know your tone. My tone? I said 4 words. You have a Tyler tone. Apparently, after 11 years of marriage, I had developed a specific audio setting for her brother. Good to know. Maybe I could put it on my resume. I dropped it because, again, peacekeeper, problem solver. But on the drive to her parents' house, Emma was too quiet. Normally, she would talk about work, complain about traffic, or remind me not to bring up politics with her father because Richard believed every problem in America could be solved by common sense and a better lawnmower. This time, nothing. She just stared out the window, tapping her fingers against her knee. I looked over. You okay? Yeah. There it was again. The married person, yeah. Not yes. Not I'm good. Just yeah. Which meant no. I said, Emma, what's going on? She sighed. Can we please just have a normal dinner? That answer gave me all the comfort of hearing a surgeon say, let's just see what happens. When we arrived, Susan opened the door before we even rang the bell. Too cheerful. That was warning number 2. Oh, you're here, she said, hugging Emma first, then me. Come in, come in. Dinner's almost ready. The house smelled like roast chicken, garlic bread, and emotional debt. Richard was in the living room, sitting in his recliner with a glass of iced tea, watching a baseball game with the focused expression of a man desperately pretending everything was normal. Tyler was on the couch. That was warning number 3. Tyler did not usually arrive early to family dinners. Tyler arrived late, wearing sunglasses indoors and carrying excuses like party favors. But that day, he was already there. Sitting forward, hands clasped, knee bouncing, no phone in his hand. That last part scared me most. A Tyler without a phone was like seeing a shark walking upright. Something was very wrong. Hey man, he said. Tyler. He gave me a tight smile. I nodded politely to him. We moved to the dining room. Susan had set the table like she was hosting Thanksgiving for a magazine spread. Good plates, cloth napkins, candles, the whole production. That was warning number 4. Nobody brings out cloth napkins unless someone died, got engaged, or needs money. We sat down. Dinner began with forced small talk. Richard talked about his neighbor's fence. Susan asked Emma about work. Tyler pushed green beans around his plate like they owed him money. I ate quietly, waiting for the trapdoor to open. It happened after dessert. Of course it did. They let me eat pie first. That was almost merciful. Susan cleared her throat. So, she said. 1 syllable. My soul left my body, saw the rest of the evening from above, and whispered, "Good luck, idiot." Richard put his fork down. Emma sat straighter. Tyler looked at the table. I leaned back in my chair. There it was, the family meeting. Susan reached across the table and touched Tyler's hand. Tyler has had a bit of a setback. A setback. That was a generous word. A setback is when your flight gets delayed. A setback is when your washing machine breaks. Tyler did not have setbacks. Tyler had self-inflicted financial avalanches. I looked at him. What happened? Tyler rubbed his face. It's complicated. Of course it was. People who make good decisions rarely begin explanations with, "It's complicated." Richard spoke next. He got involved with some people. I blinked. Some people? Tyler groaned. It's not like that. That was comforting. Very specific. Cleared everything right up. Susan said, "It was an investment." I nearly laughed. An investment? Emma shot me a look. I closed my mouth. Tyler leaned forward. A friend of mine had this opportunity. It was supposed to be short-term, high return. I put some money in, and then there were fees, and then I had to cover a few things, and then reality entered the chat? I asked. Emma's foot kicked mine under the table. Tyler frowned. I know I messed up. That was new. Usually, Tyler's apologies came wrapped in so many excuses they needed their own zip code. How much? I asked. Nobody answered. That was warning number 5, 6, and 7. I looked around the table. How much, Tyler? He swallowed. 48,000. Silence. The kind of silence that makes you hear the refrigerator humming in another room. I stared at him. $48,000. Not 4,800. Not, I forgot to pay insurance. 48,000. That was not a mistake. That was a Netflix documentary waiting for a narrator. I said, how does a 29-year-old man accidentally owe $48,000? Tyler's jaw tightened. I said I messed up. Yeah, that part was clear. Susan's eyes filled with tears. Here we go. He's scared, Will. He could lose everything. What everything? Emma said my name sharply. Will. I looked at her. She gave me that look again. The one that said, not now. But I was tired. Tired of Tyler. Tired of everyone acting like responsibility was a rare medical condition Tyler had sadly been born without. Richard said, we're trying to figure out a way to help him before this gets worse. I asked, who is we? Another silence. And then Emma spoke. Calmly. Too calmly. Like she was discussing where to put a bookshelf. It's fine, she said. Will sell his Mustang. That'll cover most of it. For a second, I thought I had misheard her. Not because the sentence was unclear, but because surely, my wife had not just volunteered my car, my money, and my life's work like she was donating an old lamp to Goodwill. I slowly turned toward her. Excuse me? Emma did not even blink. Your car, she said. We don't really need it. I looked at her, then at Tyler, then at Richard and Susan. Nobody looked surprised. That was the moment I realized this had already been discussed. Not with me, obviously. Why include the man who owned the car? That would just clutter the process with consent. I let out a small laugh. Not a happy laugh. More like the sound your brain makes when it refuses to process stupidity at full volume. I'm not selling my Mustang. Emma's face tightened. Will. No. Don't be selfish. There it was. The family classic. Selfish. A word people use when you refuse to set yourself on fire so they can toast marshmallows. I said, Tyler is 29 years old. He got himself into this. He can get himself out. Tyler looked wounded. Good. Maybe he could invest in a mirror next. Susan whispered, Will, please. I shook my head. No. I'm sorry, Susan, but no. I have helped before. More than once. He never paid me back. He never changed. And now you're sitting here talking about my car like it's already on Craigslist. Emma's voice dropped. Stop. I looked at her. No, I'm not going to stop. This is insane. Her eyes flashed. Will, don't start. I'm not starting anything. I'm ending the idea that every time Tyler does something stupid, I become the emergency fund. Richard sighed. He's family. I nodded. He is your family. He is my brother-in-law. That does not make me his financial airbag. Tyler muttered, It's just a car. I stared at him. Then sell yours. He looked away. Of course. Amazing how quickly just a car becomes sacred when it belongs to the person saying it. Emma's chair scraped back slightly. Her face was red now. You are embarrassing me. I looked around the table. No, Emma. I think this conversation was embarrassing before I joined it. That was apparently the wrong thing to say. Her hand came down on the table, not hard enough to rattle plates, but enough to make everyone freeze. Then she snapped, Shut up. Don't talk back to me. The room went completely still. No forks, no glasses, no breathing. Even the house seemed offended. I looked at my wife of 11 years. The woman I had stood beside through job stress, family drama, medical scares, holidays, bad haircuts. And that one year she decided we should both try green smoothies. I waited for her to correct herself, to blink, to realize what she had just said. She didn't. So I asked, very calmly, Did you really just tell me to shut up? Emma's mouth tightened. Yes, she said, because you're making this harder than it needs to be. I nodded once. That was all I needed. I pushed my chair back slowly, not dramatically, not like a movie hero. Just a man standing up because something inside him had finally clicked into place. I picked up my jacket from the back of the chair. Emma frowned. What are you doing? I put one arm into the sleeve. Tyler stared at me like I had just started speaking Latin. Susan looked panicked. Richard looked at his plate, which was apparently very interesting all of a sudden. Emma stood. Will. I put on the jacket. She said, Where are you going? I picked up my keys from the table. Then I looked at her and said, Somewhere people don't think they get to order me around. And I walked out. I made it to the car without anyone following me, which honestly surprised me. Part of me expected Emma to come charging out of the house, arms crossed, ready to continue the conversation in the driveway, because apparently the dining room had not been enough of a stage. But no, the front door stayed closed. The house behind me glowed warm and yellow through the windows, like some cozy family painting titled, People Pretending They Did Not Just Try to Liquidate a Man's Soul for Tyler. I got into my truck, not the Mustang. The Mustang was safe at home, probably sitting in the garage, unaware that it had almost been sacrificed to the god of bad decisions. I sat behind the wheel for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. The strange thing was, I wasn't angry, not in the way people expect. I wasn't shaking. I wasn't yelling. I wasn't having some dramatic movie moment where I punched the dashboard and screamed into the night. I just felt done. That was the only word for it. Done. Like something inside me had quietly reached the end of a very long hallway, opened a door, and stepped out. My phone buzzed before I even started the engine. Emma. Of course. I looked at the screen. Are you seriously leaving? I stared at the message. Was I seriously leaving? No, Emma. I was doing a quick interpretive dance in the driveway. The jacket and keys were just props. I started the truck. Another buzz. Emma. Will, come back inside? Then another. Emma. You're making a scene. That one made me laugh. I actually laughed out loud alone in my truck. I was making a scene? Not the surprise auction of my Mustang. Not Tyler's $48,000 clown parade. Not my wife telling me to shut up like I was a golden retriever chewing on a slipper. No. Me leaving quietly was the scene. I put the phone face down in the cup holder and pulled out of the driveway. For the first few minutes I drove without a plan. I just needed distance. Distance from that house. Distance from the silence that followed Emma's words. That silence bothered me almost as much as the sentence itself, because nobody corrected her. Nobody said, Emma, Don't talk to your husband like that. Nobody said that was out of line. Nobody even gave her the polite family version of disapproval. They all just sat there, waiting for me to swallow it, waiting for me to do what I had always done. Calm down, smooth it over, make it easy for everyone else. But I was finished being easy. My phone kept buzzing. At a red light, I checked it. Emma, stop being childish. There it was, the emergency switch from command to insult. Emma, you embarrassed me. My parents are upset. Tyler is already going through enough. I stared at that last one for a second. Tyler was going through enough. Poor Tyler. A man who had somehow turned his adult life into a subscription service for consequences. I typed a reply. Then deleted it. Typed another. Deleted that too. Finally, I wrote, I'll talk when you're ready to speak to me with respect. I sent it. 3 dots appeared immediately, then disappeared, then appeared again. That little typing bubble was like watching a bomb technician sweat. Finally, her reply came. Respect? Are you kidding me right now? I did not answer. A few seconds later, Emma, you walked out on my family. I almost replied, no, I walked out on being publicly trained like a disobedient Labrador. But I decided sarcasm over text rarely helped anyone. Besides, if I started, I might not stop. So I kept driving. I ended up in the parking lot of a small hotel about 20 minutes from our house. Not fancy, not terrible. I parked, went inside, and got a room. The woman at the desk asked if I needed one night. I almost said yes. Then I heard Emma's voice in my head. Shut up, don't talk back to me. 1 week, I said. The clerk looked up. 1 week? Yeah. She typed something into the computer. King bed okay? Perfect. Because apparently I was making executive decisions now. Wild concept. I went to the room, locked the door, and stood there for a moment. A beige room, a bed, a small desk, a television mounted slightly crooked, a coffee machine that looked like it had seen things. It should have felt sad. It didn't. It felt quiet. Quiet in a way my own house had not felt in years. I sat on the edge of the bed and finally let myself breathe. My phone rang. Emma. I let it ring. Then again. Then Susan. That was new. I let that ring too. Then Richard. Then Emma again. Then a number I recognized as Tyler. That one made me laugh. Tyler calling me was bold. Like the Titanic calling the iceberg to complain about damages. I ignored all of them. A few minutes later, the messages started coming from the family group chat. Yes, we had a family group chat. Because apparently hell has Wi-Fi. Susan. Will, sweetheart, please come back. Everyone is very upset. Sweetheart. That was Susan's favorite word when she wanted something. When she didn't want something, my name became William, even though literally no one called me William except doctors and the DMV. Richard. This has gotten out of hand. Let's all cool down. Classic Richard. A man could watch a volcano erupt in his living room and say, let's not overreact. Then Tyler joined. Tyler. Dude, this is really not helping. I stared at that message. This is really not helping. The man who owed $48,000 was evaluating my crisis management skills. Amazing. I typed, neither did your investment strategy. Then I deleted it. Growth. I was proud of myself. Emma finally wrote in the group chat, Will, stop ignoring us. I replied only once. I left because you told me to shut up and not talk back to you in front of your entire family. I am not discussing anything tonight. Then I muted the chat. The silence afterward felt almost luxurious. I took off my shoes, lay back on the bed, and stared at the ceiling. That was when the memories started lining up. Not big dramatic memories, little ones. The kind you ignore because each one seems too small to matter. Emma answering questions for me at dinners. Emma saying, Will doesn't mind, before asking if I minded. Emma telling her mother I would help Richard with the garage before checking if I was free. Emma saying, we can cover it, when what she meant was, Will can cover it. Emma laughing when Tyler called me the bank. I had laughed too at the time, because what else do? You laugh. You make it a joke. You tell yourself it is not a big deal. Until one day someone says the quiet part out loud, and suddenly all the little things stop looking little. Around midnight, my phone buzzed again. I had muted the group chat, but Emma's direct messages still came through. Emma, are you at home? I did not answer. Emma, Will? Then, Emma, I'm going home. You better be there. You better be there. I actually sat up and stared at that message. There was something impressive about it. A woman who had told me to shut up 3 hours earlier was now trying to command my location by text. Consistency, at least. I did not reply. About 40 minutes later, another message. Emma, where are you? Then, Emma, your truck isn't here. Then a call. Then another. Then, Emma, this isn't funny. No, it was not funny. But parts of it were definitely becoming educational. I put the phone on the desk, turned it face down, and went to shower. When I came out, there were 9 missed calls. 6 from Emma, 2 from Susan, 1 from Tyler. Still bold. I sat at the desk in a towel, hair wet, looking at the phone like it was a small, angry animal. Then a voicemail notification appeared. From Emma. I played it. Her voice filled the room. Will, where the hell are you? You can't just walk out and disappear. We are married. You need to come home so we can talk about this like adults. I paused the voicemail. Like adults. That was rich. Adults do not usually tell other adults to shut up in front of witnesses unless one of them is on a reality show or running for office. I deleted the voicemail. Then I turned on Do Not Disturb. I slept badly. Not because I missed her. That came later, in waves. I slept badly because my brain kept replaying the dinner, her voice, the table, Tyler's stupid face, the way Richard looked at his plate, the way Susan looked wounded, like I had somehow hurt her by refusing to be robbed politely. At 6 in the morning, I woke up to sunlight leaking around the curtains and a dry mouth. My first thought was, I need coffee. My second thought was, I did not go home. My third thought was, good. I checked my phone. 23 messages, 4 missed calls, 1 email, an email. Emma had emailed me. That was new. Subject line, come home. I opened it. It was not an apology. It was a list. A beautifully organized list, because Emma could make emotional pressure look like a project proposal. She wrote that I had overreacted, that everyone was shocked, that her parents had barely slept, that Tyler felt terrible, that I had humiliated her, that she understood I was attached to the Mustang, but family was more important than an old car. I read that sentence twice. Then I closed the email. A few minutes later, I got a text from Tyler. Tyler, man, I know last night he wouldn't ask if I had another option. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled hotel coffee on myself. He really sent that. The man had watched my wife tell me to shut up, watched me leave, and still woke up thinking, maybe now is a good time to ask again. Tyler had the survival instincts of a moth near a candle. I answered him. Not with emotion, not with a paragraph. Just, you do have another option. Take responsibility. He replied almost immediately. Tyler. Wow. That was it. I nodded at the phone. Yes, Tyler. Wow, indeed. At 8:30, Emma called again. This time I answered. Not because I was ready, because I wanted to hear what she would say when she could not perform for an audience. Where are you? She demanded. Good start. I looked at the beige hotel wall. Good morning to you too. Will, where are you? Somewhere quiet. Are you at a hotel? Yes. She went silent for a second. Come home. No. Another silence. This one was different. She had expected anger. She had expected yelling. She had expected maybe a dramatic apology from me for leaving. She had not expected no. What do you mean no? I mean no. You're being ridiculous. I'm being very clear. You walked out over one sentence. There it was. I sat back in the chair. No, Emma. I walked out because you told me to shut up and not talk back to you in front of your parents and your brother. Then when I asked if you really meant it, you confirmed it. You were making everything harder. No, I was making it harder for all of you to pretend my property was already sold. She made a frustrated sound. It's a car, Will. It's my car. It's a thing. So is your wedding ring. Should I pawn it for Tyler? That shut her up. For maybe 3 seconds. Then she said, that is completely different. Because it belongs to you? No, because it means something to you? She did not answer. I said, exactly. She lowered her voice. Will, please, we need to talk about this. I agree. Then come home. No. Why not? Because I'm not coming back to be scolded into obedience. Oh my God. Yeah, I imagine this is inconvenient. You are acting like I abused you. I closed my eyes. I'm acting like my wife publicly disrespected me and still thinks the problem is that I objected. She was quiet. I continued. I'll talk to you when you're ready to apologize without explaining why I deserved it. She laughed once. Cold. So now I have to beg? No, you have to understand. That you care more about a car than my brother? No, that I care more about respect than being useful. That one landed. I could hear it. The pause changed. For one brief second, there was no anger, just her breathing. Then she said, I have to go to work. Okay. So what, you're just staying there? For now. This is insane. Maybe. I almost hung up. Then she said quietly, my parents think you're being cruel. I smiled, but there was no humor in it. Your parents thought selling my car without asking me was reasonable. Their scale may need calibration. Will, I'm done for now. Don't hang up on me. There it was again, the command. I said, goodbye, Emma. And I ended the call. For a long time, I just sat there in the hotel chair. My coffee had gone cold. My marriage, apparently, had gone colder. But for the first time in years, I had said no and meant it. And nobody had managed to drag me backward. Over the next 3 days, my phone became everyone's favorite hobby. Emma called every morning. Susan texted every afternoon. Richard left 2 voicemails that somehow managed to sound like business meetings. And Tyler apparently believed persistence could replace personal responsibility. His messages ranged from, can we at least talk? To, you're really going to let family fall apart over a car? I blocked him after that. The funny part? Nobody, not one person, asked how I was doing. Not one message said, are you okay? Instead, it was always, your wife is crying. Your mother-in-law is heartbroken. Tyler is terrified. Apparently, I was the only person in the story who wasn't allowed to have feelings. On Thursday, Emma showed up at my office. I saw her through the glass before she saw me. She looked exhausted. Dark circles under her eyes. Hair pulled into a messy ponytail. For a second, I almost felt guilty. Almost. Then I remembered her voice. Shut up. Don't talk back to me. That feeling disappeared. She walked into my office and closed the door. So, this is really happening. It is. She folded her arms. You're actually living in a hotel. For now. This is ridiculous. I've heard. She sighed. Will, I miss you. I looked at her. I believe you. She frowned. That's it? What do you want me to say? I want you to come home. I want my wife to understand why I left. I understand. No, you understand that I left. You still don't understand why. She sat down. I lost my temper. I shouldn't have said it. I waited. She looked at me. I kept waiting. Finally, she asked, what? I thought there was more coming. What do you mean? The apology. I just apologized. No. She blinked. You explained. She looked confused. I continued. You said you lost your temper. That's an explanation. I said I shouldn't have said it. She looked genuinely frustrated. I came all the way here, I'm trying. No, you're trying to end the argument. She leaned back. I don't understand why you're making one sentence such a huge deal. You still think this is about one sentence. It is. No. I leaned forward. It's about the fact that you believed you had the right to speak to me like that. You were embarrassing me, and your solution was to humiliate me. She opened her mouth, closed it. For the first time since the dinner, she had no immediate answer. After a long pause, she quietly asked, "So, what happens now?" "I don't know." "You don't know?" "I know I'm not coming home today." She looked down. "My parents think you're giving up on 11 years of marriage." I smiled sadly. "No, I'm refusing to spend the next 11 exactly like the last one." She looked up. "What does that mean?" "It means that wasn't the first time you treated me like my opinion didn't matter." "It wasn't?" I laughed. "You volunteered my car without asking." She stayed silent. "You volunteered my weekends to help your dad." Silence. "You promised Tyler I'd help him move." Silence. "You told your mom we'd pay for things before discussing it with me." More silence. I kept telling myself they were small things. I looked her in the eyes. But eventually, enough small things become one very big thing. She looked like someone who had just found the first crack in a wall she thought was perfectly solid. "I need time," I said. "How much?" "I don't know." She nodded slowly. "I'll wait." As she reached the door, she turned around. "I really am sorry for telling you to shut up." This time, it sounded real. For the first time since Sunday, I believed she actually meant it. The problem was, an apology doesn't automatically rebuild trust. Sometimes it only proves that something worth saving once existed. As the weekend approached, Emma asked if we could have dinner together again. "Just us and my parents," she said. "No pressure, no fighting." Against my better judgment, I agreed. Part of me still wanted to believe there was something worth saving. Dinner started quietly. No one mentioned Tyler. No one mentioned the Mustang. For a while, it almost felt normal. Then Richard cleared his throat. "Son, it's time to let this go." I looked at him. Susan nodded. "We've all said things we regret." Emma reached for my hand. "I told you I'm sorry." For a second, I thought maybe this was finally going somewhere. Then Susan said, "You know, walking out probably hurt everyone more than what Emma actually said." Richard added, "You should have stayed and worked it out." I looked around the table. Not one person had said Emma was wrong. Not one. Everything was still about my reaction. Not her words. Not the disrespect. My reaction. I leaned back. "You know what's interesting?" 4 pairs of eyes looked at me. "We've been sitting here for almost an hour." I looked at Richard, then Susan, then Tyler, who had somehow been invited halfway through dinner despite the promise that this was just immediate family. "Not one of you has said what Emma did was wrong?" Silence. Susan finally spoke. "She lost her temper." I nodded. "So that's the excuse." Richard frowned. "Will, don't twist this." "I'm not twisting anything." I looked at Emma. "I asked you that night if you really meant what you said." She lowered her eyes. "You said yes. And everyone here expected me to apologize for leaving instead." Nobody answered. That silence told me everything. Emma looked at me, tears in her eyes. "So, what now?" I took a slow breath. "Maybe we could have fixed this." Hope appeared on her face. "If you had understood that years ago." Her expression fell. I stood up. I looked around the table one last time. "I'm leaving because every person in this room thinks the real problem started when I walked out the door, instead of when my wife told me to shut up." No one argued. A week later, I filed for divorce. The process wasn't dramatic. No screaming, no revenge, just paperwork and signatures. Emma tried a few more times to talk. I listened. I believed she was sorry. I also believed she was sorry too late. Trust doesn't disappear all at once. It erodes, one moment at a time, one decision at a time, one, don't worry, will handle it, at a time. That dinner didn't destroy my marriage. It simply exposed what had been broken for years. A few months later, I took the Mustang out for a drive on a quiet Sunday morning. The windows were down. The engine sounded perfect. At a red light, my phone buzzed. A mutual friend. His message made me laugh. Tyler's in debt again. I smiled, put the phone back in my pocket, and drove away. Some lessons people only learn after losing everything. Others never learn at all. If you felt this story hit hard, drop a like, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps Steelheart beating.